Hey guys, tonight we're sailing back to 1946, to a Havana that hums with jazz and gunmetal, where the air smells like molasses and motor oil, and where one tired Irishman steps off a boat into a city that never truly sleeps. Picture this. Salt still clings to his sleeves, a worn-out fedora shadowing blue eyes that have seen too much war and not enough peace. Frank Wallace isn't a tourist, and he's definitely not looking for rum cocktails on the beach. He's here for something else entirely. He's not sure what yet, but it sure as hell isn't legal. You can almost hear the thrum of drums in the distance, feel the cobblestone heat beneath your feet, and taste the weight of decisions before they're even made. Havana is beautiful. Yes, but like a venomous orchid. One wrong step and you're in the roots, feeding it. And let's be honest, you probably wouldn't survive this version of Havana. Not unless you've got guts, a good poker face, and at least one friend who knows how to hide a body. Frank has maybe two of those things. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Frank Wallace doesn't step, he stumbles off the rickety coastal ferry and onto the sweltering docks of Havana, Cuba. His wool suit, which probably worked just fine in a Boston courtroom or some chilly Belfast alley, is already soaked through with heat and salt. He carries nothing but a suitcase held together with wire and a wallet that holds $5 American and a folded photo of a woman who hasn't written in a year. It's 1946, and Havana is the Vegas of the Caribbean, except older, more corrupt, and, in some ways, hungrier. American GIs are flooding in on weekend leave. Mobsters with gold teeth shake hands with cigar-chomping politicians. And overhead, the stars seem to blink nervously in the haze of cigarette smoke and neon. Frank doesn't know anyone here, but that's the point. He picks his way past crates of contraband liquor, a kid selling roasted peanuts, and a one-legged man singing about the war. No one says which one. The Spanish in the air is fast and forgiving, just enough for Frank to catch that the cab fare from the port is about double what it should be. He doesn't argue. He just hands over $1 and climbs into the back of a Chevrolet with busted springs. As the city rolls past, Frank counts churches and brothels. It's neck and neck. By the time he arrives at the Hotel Colon, his shirt is sticking to him like betrayal. He checks in under a fake name, Martin. Nobody asks questions. That's another thing about Havana. Cash talks, and everyone speaks the language fluently. Do you remember the day he left Boston with the first money? That was supposed to be the end of it. The cleanup job, a tidy payout and a goodbye to the life. But things never end clean for men like Frank. Upstairs, the hotel room smells like lime and mildew. He opens the balcony door to let the ocean breathe in. And that's when he sees her. The city. Havana glows from the gutters up. Soft lights spill from balconies. Phonographs hum across rooftops. A jazz trumpet screams, somewhere distant, like it knows what's coming. Frank lights a cigarette and watches it burn to the filter. He's not running. Not exactly. But something in his walk, something in the way he double-checks the lock on the door, says he's done this before. The next morning, he blends into a city that's not his. He walks, observes, eats street food that tastes like cinnamon and danger. He watches how cops never go into certain alleys and how old men at the park always shift their eyes when someone too clean walks by. By nightfall, people have noticed him. He doesn't look like the soldiers, doesn't act like the tourists, and he tips. always too much. That's how it begins. Havana notices you. And once she does, she starts asking questions you won't want to answer. He ends his second night at a bar called El Patio, the kind of place with slow fans and quicker women. He sips a mojito and listens to two men at the next table argue in hushed tones about boat schedules and the gringos from Tampa. Then a hand on his shoulder. It's the bartender. No words, just a nod toward a man in a pale linen suit seated in the shadows, not 5 feet away. Frank meets his eyes, calm, unreadable. The kind of eyes that belong to someone who knows how to dig a grave with his bare hands and still get the dirt out from under his fingernails before dinner. The man raises a glass. Frank nods back, slow, and the game begins. Many people still think that Havana's true crime wave started in the 50s, with Batista's full embrace of American mafia interests. But those who were there, who smelled it before it rotted, know it started earlier. Around now, with quiet men in dark bars, with cigarette smoke and names whispered like confessions. So what do you think? Does a man like Frank stand a chance in a city like this? Or is he already lost, walking deeper into a labyrinth that only pretends to be made of stone? Frank rubs the sleep from his eyes and stares at the ceiling fan spinning just fast enough to taunt him. His first thought is of the man in the linen suit. No name, no conversation, just a glass raised in silent acknowledgement. That was never just a drink. That was an invitation or a warning. Maybe both. Downstairs, the concierge slides him a folded note without looking up. It's written in perfect English. El Floridita. Noon. Ask for Rico. No signature. No explanation. And no question in Frank's mind that ignoring it would be unwise. El Floridita is not just any bar. It's the one Hemingway drinks at when he's in town. Red leather booths, white-jacketed bartenders, and daiquiris so cold they burn. It's loud, crowded, and the perfect place to be invisible if you know how to sit still. Frank does. Rico, when he finally appears, is younger than Frank expected. Tall, Cuban, and too handsome for the kind of business he's clearly in. He slides into the booth like he's done it 100 times and gestures to the bartender. 2 drinks arrive before a word is spoken. "You're Irish," Rico says, sipping, not a question. Frank raises an eyebrow. "That obvious? You've got the face of a man who's lost at least 3 bar fights, and won at least 5. Frank smiles, tight, polite. "What gave me away? The bone structure or the limp?" Rico doesn't laugh. He leans in. "You're not here for fun. You're not military. And you sure as hell aren't lost. So why are you here?" Frank chooses his words like he's picking a lock. "I'm looking for opportunity. And what kind of opportunity do you think Havana offers a man like you?" Frank shrugs, the kind nobody talks about in public. That earns the smallest smile from Rico, not friendly, appraising, like a pawnshop owner sizing up a stolen watch. Over the next hour, Frank learns more about Havana's underbelly than most locals know in a lifetime. Rico talks, but only in pieces, like someone offering a test, not a lesson. There are ships, cargo, names like Meyer and Luciano whispered low. There's mention of Batista's goons turning a blind eye, of cops paid in imported scotch, and always the talk of ports, ships coming in, ships going out. Nobody ever says what's inside. By the end of the meeting, Rico stands and says, "Someone will contact you. You'll get a job. You do it right, maybe there's more. Don't screw it up." Frank finishes his daiquiri alone. The bartender slides the check over, but it's already stamped. Paid. Do you remember the first time Frank did a job without knowing who it was for? Boston. A warehouse. He was 24 and still thought he had a choice. That was a lifetime ago. Now, he knows better. That night, he can't sleep. Not because he's scared. Fear burned out of him during the war, but because he feels something unfamiliar. Hope. It's the worst thing a man like Frank can feel. Hope gets you killed. A week passes before the job arrives. It's a small one. A package pickup. No questions. Drop off at a bakery on Calle Neptuno. He's told to wear a red tie. Frank plays the part. Simple tourist. Slow steps. Eyes on the architecture. The package is handed to him by a blind old man sitting in a plaza. Inside, it feels like paper. Light. Thin. But heavy with meaning. At the bakery, a woman in flower-streaked clothes takes it without a word. She gives him a loaf of bread wrapped in brown paper. Inside that, a crisp $50 bill and a note. You did well. Come to La Marina. Friday. Midnight. Frank tears the note in half and swallows one piece, drops the other into his drink. He doesn't ask who's watching. He knows someone is. Always is. La Marina is not a place you find by accident. It's a private club. If club means a dimly lit warehouse with guards and more cigars than chairs. The men here don't smile. They chew. They watch. And they speak only when the music's too loud to be overheard. Frank is brought upstairs. Another bar. Another man waiting. Not Rico this time. Older, American, broad-shouldered, wearing suspenders and a look like he's run out of patience 20 years ago. Name's Daniels, the man grunts. I run the docks. Rico says you're useful. Frank nods. I try to be. You got any loyalty, Irish? I've got bills. That gets a real laugh. Daniels pours 2 bourbons. The job is explained simply. There's a container coming in. You're going to make sure it gets where it's supposed to go. That's all. Frank knows that's never all. He doesn't ask what's inside, but he sees the glint in Daniel's eye. The kind men get when they're talking about something that could change your life, or end it. Many people still think that Cuba's post-war underworld was just a playground for American gangsters on vacation. But the truth is, Havana was its own beast, ruthless, intelligent, and already well-practiced in the art of shadows. The Americans didn't bring crime to Cuba. They just gave it better suits. So what do you think? Can a lone Irishman with a war record and a tired conscience carve out a place in this powder keg of politics and power? Or is he just another piece on a board he'll never fully understand? The night the container arrives, it rains just hard enough to mask footsteps and soften distant gunfire. Havana's docks are a tangle of cranes, crates, and men who don't like to be seen, especially not after midnight. Frank waits behind a stack of wooden pallets, collar turned up, the humidity clinging to him like guilt. The ship itself is an old freighter, rust clinging to the edges like barnacles. It hisses and groans as it's tugged in, the crew moving like shadows across its deck. Frank is told nothing except, watch the crate with the blue mark. As if that explains anything, Daniels stands nearby under an umbrella that's doing a poor job. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. His presence says everything. You screw this up, and you're not just out of work. You're out of circulation. Frank watches. He counts. 12 men unload. 3 trucks. 2 men in each cab. 1 blue-marked crate. 3rd from the rear. It's lifted carefully, too carefully for something that size, and lowered into a truck with blackout curtains. He walks away before it's secured, just like he's told. His role isn't to protect the cargo. It's to be seen watching it. Daniel's way of saying, "We're paying attention," to whoever needs the reminder. Afterwards, in the dark corner of a nearby bar called El Milagro, Frank is handed a sealed envelope and a short glass of rum. The envelope contains $500 in crisp notes, American. No note, just the cash, and a photo. It's grainy, like something shot from a distance. Frank's in it, at the docks, watching. Clear as day, there's a message on the back. One word, written in elegant cursive. Good. He exhales slowly, not out of relief, more like acceptance. This, he realizes, is no longer about opportunity. It's about entanglement. He's no longer a tourist. He's property. The next week moves fast. Frank gets a room above a tailor's shop in Vedado. Clean enough. 2 locks on the door, no questions from the landlady. Every few days, a man in a fedora passes by and nods. That's how he knows there's a job coming. And when the job comes, it's never what he expects. One morning, he's told to deliver a violin case to a barbershop in Miramar. No music inside, just stacks of cash. Another day, he follows a woman in a red dress for 3 hours, only to hand her a note at a streetlight. She doesn't even thank him. He's a ghost, a courier, a man who's paid to move without meaning. But one job changes everything. It starts with a knock on the tailor's back door. Midnight. A boy, maybe 10 years old, hands Frank a playing card. The king of spades, with a telephone number scribbled on the back. He calls. "Mr. Wallace," a voice says. "We need you to attend a meeting. You'll be speaking for someone. Don't worry, you've already agreed." Frank blinks. "I have? You just did." The address leads him to an old colonial building near the Malecon, once a mansion, now peeling and tired. Inside, red velvet chairs, cigar smoke, and a circle of men dressed like the 1920s never ended. They look at Frank like he's a math problem they don't want to solve. One of them finally speaks. "So, you're the Irishman." Frank nods. "I've been called worse." They laugh, barely. It turns out someone's been interfering with the routes. A middleman in Santiago is rerouting goods, shaving off profit. Frank is asked to explain why his people would allow this. He nearly laughs. His people? He's never even met the guy they're talking about, but he plays along. "You think we'd risk our whole setup for a few pesos? We don't steal from our own pipeline." It's the right answer, or at least close enough. After the meeting, another envelope, another photo. This time, it's the man from Santiago, bloodied, alive. Message received. Back in his room, Frank sits by the open window and listens to the waves. Below, Havana thrums with late-night life. Music, dancing, the distant pop of fireworks or something else. He thinks about the first time he ever stole something. A watch from a drunk Navy man in a Boston alley. He was 12. The man never noticed. But Frank wore that watch for years, even after it stopped ticking. Now, he wears no watch. He doesn't need to know the time. Everything moves on someone else's schedule. Many people still think that organized crime in Cuba was a one-way street, Americans using the island like a sandbox. But that's only half the story. What's often forgotten is how sharp the Cuban players were. These weren't pawns. These were kings in linen suits, playing a game with pieces nobody else could see. So what do you think? Can a man survive being useful, but not powerful? Can he dance on the edge of Havana's underworld without falling in? Frank finishes his drink. He knows the answer, but he's not ready to say it out loud. The heat settles into the city like a second skin. And Frank Wallace begins to notice how little things shift when your name starts to mean something. Not a lot. Nothing official. But enough. Street vendors nod at him a second longer than they used to. The man who runs the corner cafe pours his coffee before he orders it. Strangers cross the street a few steps earlier. Respect? Maybe, but more likely, caution. He doesn't mind. In fact, it feels like armor. Frank learns to carry himself differently. Not loud, not flashy, just deliberate. There's a power in restraint, especially in a city where men like to perform their wealth with white suits, fat cigars, and gold cufflinks. Frank stays plain, neutral. His only extravagance is a pair of handmade leather shoes, gifted by someone whose name he never learns. They fit perfectly. Each week, a new envelope arrives, under a coffee cup, inside a menu, once even baked into a loaf of bread. Always cash, always exact, always followed by a job, never a pattern. He starts to keep a notebook. Not to write down details, too dangerous. Just symbols. A red X means surveillance. A triangle means delivery. A circle, negotiation. The pages begin to look like a code book no one could ever decipher. Then comes the first close call. It's supposed to be a handoff. Simple. Frank walks into a tobacco warehouse near the port, picks up a suitcase, walks out. No contact, no names, but when he gets there, something's off. The man with the suitcase has a new face. Young, nervous, sweating too hard. Frank doesn't like it. "You're early," the man says. "I'm never early," Frank replies. There's a pause. Then the young man nods, too quickly, and tries to hand him the suitcase. Frank hesitates. That's when he sees it. The corner of a camera lens, peeking from behind a stack of boxes. Subtle. Professional. He walks away. That night, the warehouse burns down. No one's arrested. No one talks. But the message is clear. Someone tried to set him up. Daniels visits him the next day. No words. Just puts down a single silver coin on Frank's windowsill. Frank picks it up. It's American. 1902. Worn down to near blankness. He holds it in his hand for a long time after Daniels leaves. Frank's instincts have saved him. But now, he knows something new. There's no such thing as just following orders anymore. Every move he makes now comes with consequences, seen or unseen. He tries to ask questions. Quietly, casually. What was in that suitcase? Who burned the place down? But each time, the answers slip away like smoke. Everyone knows something, and no one says anything. It frustrates him. And that frustration makes him bold. He starts to explore further, talking to people, watching how money moves. Havana, he learns, isn't just a city of lights and music. It's a city of channels, of ports, papers, permits, and palms. And the black market? It's not hidden in alleys. It's everywhere. In the rum shipments that arrive a little too late. In the pharmacies that run out of penicillin every third Tuesday. In the way sugar disappears in one neighborhood and floods another. Frank starts to map it. Not physically, but mentally. He begins to see the pattern, the overlaps, the gaps, the quiet agreements. And at the center of it all, a man named Ramon Velasco. Velasco is Cuban-born, Miami-educated, and charming in a way that feels rehearsed. He wears silk shirts in the daytime and smells like imported cologne. Frank meets him in a hotel bar where no one seems to drink. "You've been busy," Velasco says, swirling ice in his glass. Frank shrugs. "I like to walk." Velasco grins. So did Caesar, until he didn't. They talk for an hour. Nothing direct, just history, weather, the rising cost of gasoline. But by the end, Frank understands the point. Velasco is the middleman for the middlemen. He doesn't run the black market, but he holds its ledger, and he's watching Frank closely. Later that night, Frank finds a note slipped under his door. 4 words, handwritten, "Let the ghosts sleep." It unnerves him more than it should. He lies in bed, staring at the ceiling fan as it ticks in lazy circles. Outside, the city breathes through half-closed windows and distant laughter. He listens, he waits, he wonders. Who left the note? A warning? A threat? Or something else? Many people still think that Havana in the 40s was run like a casino. Chaotic, but mostly harmless, full of swing music and rum cocktails. But that was only for the surface. Beneath, it pulsed with calculations, deals, surveillance, quiet eliminations. So what do you think? Can a man know too much before he's even said anything? Frank rolls over, eyes wide open. Tonight sleep doesn't come easily. Dawn slips into Havana with a deceptive hush, birds chirping in slow intervals, morning sweepers brushing debris from cobblestone, and the faint hiss of frying oil from small kitchens. But Frank Wallace doesn't sleep in. Not anymore. He walks, quietly, always observing. In this city, it's the morning faces that tell the truth. Vendors are tired before they begin. Policemen yawn through cigarette breaks. And the real players, the ones with influence, aren't visible at all. Frank now understands that information isn't just valuable, it's currency. And Cuba is rich with it. People talk in whispers, sure, but they talk. And if you stand still long enough, blend in deep enough, the city will speak to you. That morning, he walks by the butcher's shop 3 times. On the 4th pass, the butcher scratches his nose with 3 fingers. Signal received. Behind the shop, Frank opens a narrow door and descends a staircase to a cold, quiet basement. The walls are lined with shelves of fake ham, outdated tins, and an odd painting of a bull. In the corner, a man named Ignacio sits beside a shortwave radio. "Buenos dias, Frank," Ignacio says without looking up. "They're calling you El Zapato now." "The shoe?" Ignacio shrugs. "You keep stepping where you shouldn't." Frank smirks. Nicknames are a form of flattery and warning. He listens as Ignacio relays fragments of intercepted messages. American names mentioned in Cuban codes, Cuban generals dining at unexpected places, a shipment of coffee that smells suspiciously like gunpowder. It's not espionage. Not exactly. More like listening to the pulse of a sick patient. Frank thanks him, leaves a small roll of pesos, and walks out. Back into the sunlight. Back into the roll. That day he heads to the docks, not as a smuggler, but as a witness. There, he sees it unfold. A boat, unloading crates too carefully. Workers who won't meet his eyes. A supervisor who keeps checking his watch every 30 seconds. It's subtle, but it screams. Something illicit is happening. Frank leans against a pillar and watches. He doesn't interfere, doesn't speak. Sometimes, power comes from not acting, from knowing you're being watched, and choosing to wait. That evening, Daniels visits again. This time, they share a drink on Frank's tiny balcony. "You're digging too deep," Daniels mutters. Frank doesn't answer. Daniels continues. "This city runs because nobody pulls back the curtain. You keep tugging. There might not be anything left to see." Frank looks out at the dim skyline, where church steeples and neon signs compete. "I just want to know who's writing the script," he says softly. Daniels nods, then stands. As he leaves, he says, "Remember, Frank, writers don't always get to choose how the story ends. There's silence after he's gone." Frank sits for a long time. The air smells of salt and exhaust and wet stone. Later that week, he's invited to a poker game. Not just any game, but Velasco's game. That alone is unusual. The Cuban middleman isn't known for extending casual invitations. The venue is a penthouse suite above the National Hotel. with velvet drapes, guards in linen, and jazz records playing too quietly. Frank arrives in a gray suit, neat but forgettable, his shoes always polished. At the table, 3 Americans, 2 Cubans, and 1 woman in a green dress, who says nothing but never stops smiling. Velasco deals the first hand. His eyes flicker with amusement. "So," he says lightly, "how does a man with no accent, no title, and no allegiance manage to know so much?" Frank plays it cool. "I read the room. The game unfolds over 2 hours. The chips mean nothing. The cards even less. It's the conversation that matters. Hints, jokes, probes, everyone testing each other. When Frank wins a hand with a bluff, Velasco leans in and says, 'You're good at this, but tell me, what happens when the bluff becomes real? When people start believing your legend?' Frank leans back. 'Then maybe I fold before the river.' They both smile. After the game, Velasco walks him to the elevator. 'I like you,' he says. 'You remind me of a ghost Havana can't quite shake.' Frank chuckles. Not sure that's a compliment. 'It's not,' Velasco replies, patting his shoulder. 'But it's interesting.' That night, Frank returns home to find a black glove on his doorknob. No note, no message. But in this business, silence is a message. Many people still think that Cuba in the 1940s was just a stopover for American mobsters looking for sun and sin. But Havana had its own ecosystem, its own codes, and its own quiet enforcers. So, what do you think? Can a man become dangerous just by refusing to leave? Frank picks up the glove, turns it over once, and leaves it on the floor. He sleeps with one eye open. Morning light creeps in like a cautious spy, quiet, deliberate, and somehow suspicious. Frank wakes before it fully filters through the slats of the old jalousie windows. The glove still lies where he left it, now bathed in a soft rectangle of sunlight that makes it seem almost harmless. Almost. Frank steps over it, as if it were just another nuisance from the street. But in Havana, nothing is ever just what it seems. He shaves with cold water and cheap soap, dresses slowly and listens to the city, to the silence, to the way the pigeons on the roof flutter twice and stop. Something's off today. In the stairwell, a neighbor gives him a polite nod, but her eyes dart toward his door. Word travels fast. Symbols even faster. Down on the street, a newspaper boy yells headlines in a voice too loud for the content. Sugar prices, presidential speeches, baseball scores, all designed to lull. But Frank walks past without glancing. Today, he has a meeting with a man known only as the Consul. No one's quite sure if that's his real title or a nickname meant to disguise something uglier. What matters is that the Consul sits near the Port Authority, 2 blocks from the governor's residence, and 3 floors above a bakery that never seems to bake anything. The bakery, in fact, is a front, one that tries too hard not to be. Its windows are always just slightly fogged, and its air always smells vaguely of cinnamon. Though no one ever leaves with bread, Frank enters without knocking. Upstairs, the Consul is already waiting in a leather chair that's too big for the room. He doesn't stand. "You've been noticed," the Consul says without looking up from his espresso. Frank sits. "I usually am." The Consul finally meets his gaze. "You're American, Irish, ambitious, curious. All the things Havana doesn't need right now." "I thought Havana loved Americans." "We love tourists," the Consul corrects. You're a mirror, and people here don't like their reflection." Frank smirks, but he doesn't push. Not yet. The Consul slides a photo across the table. A man, late 30s, sharp suit, even sharper eyes. "This is Miguel Alvarez," the Consul says. "You'll want to stay away from him." "Why?" "Because I just warned you," the Consul replies. They sit in silence. Frank studies the photo a little longer before slipping it into his jacket. Outside, the sun climbs higher, turning the streets syrupy with heat. Frank walks slowly now, like a man absorbing warnings rather than ignoring them, but he doesn't avoid Alvarez. By nightfall, he's standing at the edge of the docks again, cigarette in hand, hat tilted low, jacket wrinkled from the weight of the city's attention. And then he sees him, Miguel Alvarez, laughing with two officers, slapping backs like they were old friends in a safer time. Frank lights his cigarette. Alvarez notices. Their eyes lock for half a second longer than politeness allows. It's not a challenge. Not yet. It's a question. Do you see me? Do you know what I am? Frank answers by walking away first. He doesn't need a confrontation. Not yet. What he needs is intel, patterns, whispers behind the loud parts of Havana. And that leads him to the bars again. Places where Cuban waiters pretend not to understand English, where piano music floats lazily above whispered deals. One such place, La Cascara, is known for its smoked rum and disappearing patrons. Frank slips into a corner seat and listens. Tonight, the talk is about shipments. Not sugar, not cigars. Something heavier. Something guarded. Something wrapped in layers of silence. He hears Alvarez's name again. Once, twice, then 3 times. Always followed by a pause. A waitress brings him a drink without asking. It's not what he ordered. From the gentleman at the piano, she says. Frank turns. A man in a cream-colored suit raises his glass. No words. Frank doesn't drink. Not that one. Instead, he leaves a tip large enough to be remembered and exits into the wet heat of a Havana night. Back in his apartment, the glove is gone. He stares at the spot for a long time. It's cleaner than before, as if someone had wiped the floor after taking it. Frank lies down, fully dressed, his gun within reach, his breath shallow. The city never truly sleeps, and neither does he. Many people still think that Frank Wallace was just another small-time Irishman who stumbled into a story too big for him. But what if Havana was exactly where he was supposed to be? What if every strange twist, the glove, the messages, the drinks he didn't order, wasn't a warning, but an invitation? So what do you think? Was Frank chasing danger, or was it chasing him? The fan spins lazily above his bed. Outside, the city holds its breath. By morning, Havana pretends nothing happened. The sun rises like it always does, too bright, too fast, bleaching the color out of the city's secrets. Frank Wallace wakes without moving. He listens first, always. There's no glove this time, no creak of floorboards, no unseen visitor. But that somehow feels worse. When he finally sits up, his back aches. Not from the mattress, but from tension that never leaves. Havana has a way of clinging to you like humidity. Quiet, invisible, heavy. He walks to the window, opens it, and breathes in the city. Cigars, salt, engine oil, black coffee, and beneath it all, the faintest trace of sweat and perfume. Someone had been watching again. He's sure of it. Just like yesterday, by midday, he's walking the Malecon, the long seawall where tourists take photos and locals take their time. It's where deals are struck without handshakes and threats whispered under compliments. He stops when he hears an accordion playing. The music is off-key but comforting, like a drunk uncle who used to be great at it. The man playing is old, blind, or pretending to be. Frank throws him a coin. "Careful," the man mutters without looking. "Not all coins buy silence." Frank pauses. "Neither do all threats," he replies. They don't say more. Across the street is a tailor's shop. That's his next stop. Not because he needs clothes, but because the man inside, Raul Cabrera, once ran guns through Panama. Now he sews sleeves and secrets with equal precision. "Frankie," Raul says as the bell tinkles over the door. "You look like you haven't slept since Batista's first term." "Not far off," Frank says, sitting on a stool meant for waiting husbands. Raoul glances toward the back. It's not safe for you right now. Too many ears. Too many memories. I just want a suit. Sure you do. Still, Raoul measures him. Tapes across shoulders. Fingertips press lightly on ribs. You've lost weight, he says. I've gained trouble, Frank replies. Raoul leans in. You're not the only one watching Alvarez, but you might be the only one still breathing. Frank doesn't flinch. I need something tailored fast. Raoul nods. Black or blood red? Frank smiles. Surprise me. That night, the docks are alive again, but not with cargo. There's a party. One of those too loud, too public events meant to distract the press and hide something louder. Frank wasn't invited, which of course means he'll be attending. He arrives in the new suit. Midnight blue, sharp lapels, bulletproof lining. Raoul's gift. The guards don't stop him. That's the trick. Walk like you belong, and people will forget to question your existence. Inside, it's decadence on display. Champagne, cigars, men in white tuxedos, women in silk gloves and silent judgments. Jazz echoes off the concrete walls. And there, at the center, is Miguel Alvarez. He's laughing again. Same way he was by the docks. Same grin. But now it's aimed at someone else. A senator, maybe, or a man who owns the paper. Frank watches from the bar, drink untouched. Then, a woman steps beside him. Red dress, dark hair, green eyes with more calculation than warmth. You're Frank Wallace, she says. He doesn't answer. You were in New York, then Tampa, then Miami, now Havana. He turns. You know a lot for someone I've never met. She tilts her glass toward Alvarez. That's my brother. Frank sips his drink now. Then you know what kind of man he is. She doesn't blink. The kind that leaves no witnesses. He studies her face. There's no fear there, only exhaustion. Why tell me this? She leans closer. Because you're not here to make money. You're here to change something, and that makes you interesting. Frank sets the glass down. Interesting gets people killed. She smiles. Only if they matter. Then she vanishes into the crowd. Later, on the walk back, a car trails him. Too slow. Too quiet. He ducks into a side alley, cuts through a courtyard, then disappears into the shadows of old Havana. He knows the city now, knows its rhythms, knows where light bulbs haven't worked in years. At home, he finds a note under the door. We're watching, so is she. No signature, no symbol, just those words. He burns it. Still, he doesn't sleep. Somewhere, someone is setting a trap, and Frank is walking straight toward it. Many people still think Frank Wallace was reckless, a rogue Irishman too far from home, thinking Havana could be tamed. But what if he understood the city better than anyone? What if Havana didn't need taming, just listening? So what do you think? Did Frank just have a death wish? Or did he see something the rest of us missed? The city hums outside. Inside, Frank sharpens his silence like a blade. The morning air tastes different now. Not fresher, just heavier, as if Havana knows what Frank Wallace is about to do and is holding its breath. He lights a cigarette with shaking fingers. Not fear, anticipation. There's a difference. One stabs, the other simmers. From his apartment window, he watches the men who watch him. They're not subtle. They never are. One leans against a lamppost with a newspaper he never flips. Another circles the block twice in a car too clean for this neighborhood. Frank scribbles something in a small notebook, tears the page, folds it 3 times, and stuffs it inside the hollow base of an old fountain pen. He slips that pen into his breast pocket, always over the heart, as if the ink might one day shield him from bullets. Then he goes to meet Father Miguel. The church is crumbling. The kind of holy place where pigeons outnumber prayers. But the man inside is sharp. Too sharp for someone who wears a collar and listens to confessionals. "You're late," the priest says without looking up. "I'm alive," Frank answers, slipping into a pew. "That won't last if you keep dancing with devils." Frank chuckles. "I'm Irish. We invented the waltz of sin." Father Miguel finally turns. His eyes are lined with disappointment and something else. Sadness, maybe. "You saw Alvarez?" I saw his smile. "And his sister?" Frank nods. Father Miguel frowns. "Be careful. Her father was dangerous. She's worse. She doesn't kill people. She rearranges them." Frank shrugs. "I've been rearranged before." The priest sighs. "There's a shipment coming through Mariel Port. Weapons, not cigars." "Alvarez? Who else?" Frank leans forward. "I need proof. You need an exit strategy." "Same thing." That night, the rain comes soft and slow. A Havana lullaby. Frank uses it as cover. He's back at the port, crouched behind stacked crates stamped with fake tobacco labels. He watches the guards, notes the hand signals, the way they always check their watches at the same time. Routine makes men vulnerable. Around 2 a.m., a truck pulls up. No headlights. 4 men jump out. They don't unload cigars. They carry crates with Russian lettering, carefully, reverently, like relics from a war that hasn't officially arrived. Frank takes photos. The click of the shutter is a whisper in the storm. Then something changes. The guards look up, not out. One of them points directly at him. He runs. Not a sprint, a glide. Years of muscle memory kick in. Left through the alley, right past the shuttered cantina, over the chain-link fence, and down into the sewer entrance he memorized 3 nights ago. They don't catch him, but now they know he's watching. Back home, he develops the film in a dark room that smells of vinegar and tension. The photos are grainy, wet, perfect. Proof. He needs allies now, but Havana isn't built for allies. It's built for debts, so he visits Maria Delgado, a former journalist turned gossip columnist, because sometimes rumor pays better than truth. "Frankie," she says, cigarette smoke curling around her syllables. "Last time you gave me a story, 3 people vanished. I'm hoping for 4 this time." He lays out the photos, one by one, carefully, as if dealing cards. She whistles low. "You're going to get yourself killed." "Probably, but it'll make a great front page. If they print it." She eyes him. "What do you want?" "Circulate it, quietly. Let the Americans hear it through unofficial channels." She raises an eyebrow. "You want them involved?" "I want Alvarez nervous. Paranoid men make mistakes." She nods slowly. "You're not just trying to survive this, are you?" "No," Frank says, and there's steel in his tone. "I'm trying to finish it." The next evening, a knock at his door. Raul again. No smile this time. They took Father Miguel. Frank doesn't move. He's gone. No body, no warning, just gone. Frank presses a hand to his chest, feels the pen there. "They want you rattled," Raul says. "Don't be." "I'm not." Raul studies him. "Then be quick." Frank visits the church. It's empty. Cold. He kneels at the altar, not to pray, but to remember. "Do you remember the night we met Miguel listening to tango under a crumbling steeple? Now the pews are silent, the wine gone stale. Even God feels absent tonight. He leaves a single candle burning. It's not for the priest. It's for the reckoning. Many people still think the CIA was the one who started the real Havana unraveling in the 40s. But Frank Wallace? He was already fraying its edges before Langley sent anyone. So what do you think? Can one man shift the tide of an empire? The storm rolls in, soft as silk, and Frank sharpens his silence again. The candle in the old church burns low. Wax puddles at its base like melted resolve, but Frank Wallace's spine stays straight as he exits through the rear gate. Tonight, he's not interested in Havana's glossy veneer. No dancing girls or swing bands, just shadows. Just the kind of darkness that whispers secrets if you listen close enough. He's meeting a man named Cuervo. Not his real name. Nobody uses those anymore. Cuervo runs the docks, but unofficially. If something disappears from a manifest, Cuervo knows where it reappeared. If someone vanishes, Cuervo probably arranged the boat ride. They meet near the slaughterhouse. Not poetic, but fitting. "Frankie," Cuervo says, voice soaked in smoke. "You bring me trouble?" Frank shrugs. "I bring opportunity. I don't like your kind of opportunity." "You will when you see the photos." Frank hands him a small envelope. 2 pictures inside. One shows crates of Russian-marked weaponry. The other, Alvarez himself, standing too close to a known cartel enforcer. Cuervo whistles, slow. "You want this spread?" "No. I want it placed. In the right ears. The Americans need to hear it from more than one mouth." Cuervo leans back. "And what do I get?" Frank smiles. "Leverage." There's a pause. Then Cuervo laughs. "You're mad." "Probably. But you're the first Irishman in Cuba I've seen with a plan that doesn't involve rum or regret." He tucks the envelope away. Consider it done. Back at his apartment, Frank finds a note under the door. No signature. Just a single line. "She knows what you did." He doesn't need to ask who she is. Elena, Alvarez's sister. Smarter than her brother. Meaner, too. She's the kind of person who doesn't fight you. She rewrites your ending. He burns the note, not out of fear, but protocol, and he calls Maria Delgado again. "Print it," he says. "Are you sure?" "No, but do it anyway." The next day, it's front-page news in Miami. Not Havana, of course. The Cuban press doesn't touch this kind of thing. But the American tabloids? They love a scandal. Especially when it involves communists, guns, and Havana nightclubs. The story explodes quietly. Not in Havana's streets, but in its underbelly. People whisper. Contacts vanish. One American tourist gets detained by mistake. Alvarez cancels 2 public events, and the CIA makes a phone call Frank has been waiting for. A man named Thompson shows up. Beige suit, forgettable face. "Mr. Wallace," he says, shaking Frank's hand like he's picking up a dry cleaning ticket. "Agent? Let's not call me that." "Fine. Tourist?" "Closer." They sit in a cafe with chipped cups and watery coffee. Thompson lays out the terms like he's haggling for a used car. "We don't want you on the payroll." "Good. We don't want to protect you." "Didn't ask. But we'll support visibility. Keep certain parties from acting too rashly." Frank nods. "And in return, keep doing what you're doing. Make it louder, make it messy. Havana's about to become the world's favorite cocktail. We'd like to know what's in the mix." Frank finishes his coffee. "I'll stir it for you. Do you remember that first time Frank used a camera as a weapon instead of a gun? This is the sequel. Only now, the stakes are geopolitical. The support is unofficial, of course. But it's real. Suddenly, people who used to cross the street to avoid Frank now stop to shake his hand. Taxi drivers nod. Bar owners offer a second drink. On the house. And Elena? She invites him to dinner. That alone should terrify him. She greets him in silk, all warmth and poison. "You're brave," she says, pouring wine. "Or stupid. Depends on the night." They sit on a balcony overlooking the city. The air smells like roasted pork and something older. History, maybe. "You know my brother's going to kill you," she says softly. "I'm betting you'll stop him." She laughs. "Why?" "Because you want Havana. And you know I'm more useful alive." Elena studies him. "You think I'm playing you?" "No," Frank says, lifting his glass. "I think we're dancing." There's a long pause. Then, the soft clink of her glass against his. "To music neither of us wrote," she says. That night Frank doesn't sleep. He walks the Malecon, hands in his pockets, jacket flapping in the sea wind. The waves crash like applause from a hostile audience. Somewhere in the city, A man gets shot for reasons that no longer matter. Havana keeps moving. And Frank Wallace? He's officially in the game. Many people still think the 1940s in Havana were all mambo and mojitos. But those people never read the footnotes, the ones where men like Frank played 3 sides at once and hoped no one called their bluff. So what do you think? Was he saving the city? Or just dragging it deeper? The next morning begins with a knock. Not the hurried tap of a friend or the heavy thud of the military. It's a deliberate, composed rhythm. 3. Pause. 2. Frank knows that knock. He opens the door to find Father Bernardo, dressed in civilian clothes, hands folded, eyes steady. Morning confession? Frank asks, stepping aside. More like mutual absolution. They sit in the kitchen, no coffee, just a bowl of sugar cubes between them. Bernardo takes one, presses it between thumb and forefinger, then lets it dissolve on his tongue before speaking. You poked the bear. I kicked it in the teeth. The priest sighs. And now it's bleeding. You know what that draws. Sharks. Bernardo nods. The kind that wear suits and smile. Frank leans back, watching a dust mote swirl in the sunlight. You didn't come here to scold me. No. I came to tell you that there's a car outside your building that hasn't moved in 2 days. A young man inside, pretending to read Don Quixote. Frank's lips curl. How literary. He's not Cuban, he's not a reader, and he's definitely not alone. Frank stands and pulls the curtain aside, just enough to confirm. Same car, same kid. Sunglasses on, despite the overcast sky. Do they know you came? Bernardo shakes his head. No, but they'll guess. They always guess. Frank thanks him, and the priest stands to leave. You're playing a long game, Bernardo says at the door. Just make sure you're still around when the board flips. That afternoon, Frank makes a quiet trip to El Rincon, a chaotic market where identities go to hide and secrets are traded for a price. He doesn't come for information this time. He comes for a man called Lucio. Lucio sells antiques. At least, that's what his paperwork says. In truth, he restores radios, and if asked politely, he modifies them too. Frank slips through the curtain behind the stall. Lucio. The man turns, cigarette dangling, eyes half-lidded. Wallace. Thought you were dead. Working on it. Lucio smiles. What do you need? A shortwave that can't be traced. One way. Lucio grunts. American frequency? Russian. There's a pause. Then Lucio whistles. Spicy. He starts assembling the parts, muttering in half Spanish, half grunt. Frank leans on the workbench. How's your son? Out of jail, for now. You ever think of getting him out of Havana? Lucio pauses. And go where? The devil I know wears linen and smells like cigars. Frank doesn't press. They all have reasons to stay. Even the ones who swear they'll leave. When Lucio hands over the modified radio, he whispers, broadcast short, end fast. They'll be listening. Frank nods. Thanks, old friend. Back at his apartment, Frank hides the radio inside a hollowed-out dictionary. Not subtle, but quick. He dials in a frequency he hasn't used since 43 and speaks, low and steady. Dandelion to Grove. Repeat. Dandelion to Grove. Havana compromised. Intel confirmed. Alvarez linked to Soviet arms. Need extraction plan for contact. Maria D. Confirm receipt. He cuts the line. No reply expected. The next part isn't about listening. It's about watching, waiting, and surviving. 3 days pass. No retaliation. No contact. Just whispers. Elena sends a basket of oranges. A note reads, still dancing. He doesn't eat the fruit. Then, at dusk, he gets a message scrawled in lipstick on a napkin at a cafe. Hotel Nacional, room 505, tonight. He considers not going. Then he goes. The Hotel Nacional is gleaming, decadent, full of jazz and politicians. It's the kind of place that pretends revolution is a rumor. Room 505 is dark when he enters. Then click. A dim lamp flickers on, revealing a man in uniform. Not Cuban, not American, Russian. He sits in a chair like he owns gravity. "Mr. Wallace," he says with a trace of a smile. Or should I say, dandelion? Frank doesn't flinch. "Depends who's asking." The Russian gestures to a second chair. "I've been reading your file. I hear it's a real page-turner." They speak for half an hour. No threats, no offers, just curiosity. The Russian wants to know what Frank's goal is. Frank tells him the truth, to keep Havana from becoming another Berlin. The Russian laughs. Too late, but he stands, shakes Frank's hand, and leaves. It's not an agreement, it's an acknowledgement. The next day, the car outside his apartment is gone. Many people still think Cold War espionage happened in snowy capitals and behind iron curtains. But Havana? Havana was where everyone went to pretend they were just tourists. So what do you think? Was Frank in over his head? Or was he just the only one willing to hold his breath? It rains in Havana that night. Not a tropical storm, but a whisper of water that turns the streets slick and the neon signs into soft, glowing ghosts. Frank Wallace watches from a bench outside the El Capitolio, cigarette slowly burning down, the scent of the wet city mixing with tobacco and something harder to place. Maybe nostalgia, maybe worry. In his pocket, a scrap of paper with just one word. Neves. He remembers the name. She used to run numbers for the Irish in Miami. Cuban exile. Beautiful in the kind of way that made men forget where they'd parked their cars. Rumor was, she vanished after a double cross in 44, but Frank had heard whispers. Neves hadn't vanished. She had been absorbed into something bigger, and now she wanted to talk. Frank finds her 2 hours later, behind a speakeasy in Old Havana that doesn't technically exist. She's older, sharper. Her hair dyed charcoal silver like a Cuban moon. The kind of woman who sees everything before you say a word. "You're heavier," she says by way of greeting. "And you're still breathing," Frank replies. Shocking for both of us. They sit in a tiny back room with no windows, sipping bitter espresso that tastes like battery acid. Neves leans in. "You've made yourself quite a thorn." I try to be consistent. She taps the table. "The Russians want out, not completely, just quieter. You know why? Because Havana's hot." "No," she smiles. "Because Havana is watching itself. Every eye here belongs to someone. The Cubans, the Syndicate, the Soviets, even the Vatican, if you believe the rumors." Frank exhales. "And me? You? You're the cockroach that everyone wants dead, but no one can justify stepping on." They sit in silence for a moment. Then she drops a folder on the table. Thick. Smells like damp paper and secrets. What's this? Proof that the Syndicate's been laundering arms through sugar plantations. Frank flips through it. Names. Dates. A receipt for 50 crates of rifles hidden in molasses barrels. "This is suicide," he mutters. "No, this is clarity." That night, Frank doesn't sleep. He reads every page, every scribble in the margins, every coded transmission. He's seen a lot of dirty laundry, but this is an entire wardrobe. And the tag on every piece says, "Made in America." By morning, he's made a decision. He'll leak the file, not to the press, not to the government, but to someone with nothing left to lose. There's a kid named Sergio who runs a pirate radio station out of a fishing boat. It's low wattage, barely reaches beyond the bay, but it's free, and it's loud. Frank finds him by bribing a dock worker with 3 packs of Lucky Strikes. Sergio wears headphones the size of grapefruits and has a laugh that could start fires. When Frank hands him the folder, Sergio's eyes go wide. "This is real?" Frank nods. "You read it on air, slowly, clearly. Then you disappear for a month." Sergio gulps. "I can do that." He does. The next evening, the sound of Sergio's voice cuts through Havana's static. Documents indicate that known associates of Meyer Lansky transferred military-grade weaponry through sugarcane supply chains. Frank listens from his apartment, lights off, heart steady. Somewhere across the city, someone knocks over a bottle of rum and forgets to pick it up. Somewhere else, a Soviet liaison makes a phone call in code. And in Washington, a minor file gets promoted to urgent status. By midnight, Havana is humming. Elena calls. "You lit a fire." "I didn't strike the match," Frank says. She pauses. "They'll come for you." I'll leave the door open. The morning is heavy with tension. Tourists smile a little too wide. Police seem a little too calm. Frank walks to the Plaza de la Revolucion, passing murals and memory. At a café, a street pianist plays something slow and sad. Maybe Chopin, maybe just a dream. He stops for a coffee. That's when he notices the envelope. No one near it. Just sitting on his table like a gift from a ghost. Inside, a photo. Black and white, grainy. A man he doesn't recognize. Until he does. It's a photo of himself, taken from a rooftop. Dated yesterday. Time stamped. High angle. They know where he lives, where he goes, what he drinks, and they want him to know they know. Many people still think Havana in the 40s was just cigars and music, a playground for American escapists. But under the rhythm and rum, there was rot. Secrets tangled so tightly, no one remembered who pulled the first thread. So, what do you think? If you were Frank, would you run? Or tighten your tie and wait for the next knock? Frank Wallace doesn't run. He never has. Even when his gut tells him the smart move is to vanish, just melt into the folds of Havana's chaos and let someone else inherit the storm, he stays. Because Havana isn't just a setting anymore. It's the stage, the spotlight, and in some ways, the last act of his complicated story. The photo in the envelope doesn't scare him. Not exactly. It just confirms what he already knows. He's no longer a shadow in Havana. He's a symbol now of rebellion, of disruption, of a man who's seen the edges of power and decided not to play nice. That afternoon, he walks through the market district. It's loud and bright, smells of fish and mangoes, children chasing chickens and grandmothers haggling over beans. The normalcy of it all is disarming, and yet something's off. He feels watched, not by the government thugs in baggy suits or the syndicate bruisers trying to blend in with Panama hats. No, this is something different. A priest follows him for 5 blocks. Not really a priest. Too broad in the shoulders. Shoes too polished. Cross around his neck suspiciously spotless. Frank ducks into a butcher shop. The priest waits outside. Inside, the butcher, a wiry old Cuban named Tomas, nods solemnly and pulls down the back curtain. Frank steps through into a cold storage room. Elena is already there. "You're being followed," she says, stating the obvious. "They want me to know. That's the point." She folds her arms. Then we escalate. "How?" She tosses him a telegram. It's unsigned, but the wording is unmistakable. A meeting request. Midnight. Docks. Terminal 7. No backup. It's either a trap, Elena says, or the start of something very big. Frank reads the telegram again. He smiles. At midnight, Terminal 7 hums with the low buzz of cargo machinery and the scent of salt and diesel. Frank waits beneath a burnt-out light, hands in his coat pockets, heartbeat steady as jazz. The man who arrives isn't Cuban, isn't American. He's Irish, and not the imported whiskey smuggling type. This one's pure Belfast. Gray hair, stiff collar, eyes that have seen too many funerals. "Wallace," he says. "Paddy O'Shaughnessy." The old Irishman grins. "You're a hard man to find. Even harder to clean up after." Turns out, Paddy represents a splinter of the old Irish mob. Those who didn't migrate into American hands, but stayed quietly connected through the shipping lanes, the whiskey runs, and strangely enough, the Catholic Church. He hands Frank a folded map. "Cuba's just a node," Paddy says. "The weapons, the money, it's moving faster than anyone's tracking. But someone like you, Frankie, you slow things down. Frank studies the map. Dozens of red circles. Havana is just one of them. So what? I'm supposed to do what? Burn every warehouse? Sink every boat? Patty shakes his head. You be loud. Loud gets me killed. No. Loud buys time for the rest of us. Frank leaves the meeting with one thing. Purpose. He isn't going to run Havana. He's going to unravel it, one string at a time. The next few days blur into motion. He leaks more documents, uses Sergio's pirate station to spin coded messages, leaves envelopes on cafe tables with names written in pencil, names of dirty officials, rigged inspectors, smuggling coordinators. Some disappear overnight. Others stay, pretending nothing happened. He's careful, paranoid even. Elena watches his back. Neves provides occasional intel. Patty slips him updates through second-hand books, but the noose tightens. One morning, a crate arrives at his apartment. No return label. Inside, a single shoe, his size. Elena finds him holding it, staring. It's a message, she says. He nods. Yeah, but it's incomplete. How so? There's supposed to be 2. They don't speak of it again. But that night, Elena doesn't go home. She sleeps on his couch. Not for love, for logistics, for safety. They talk until 3 a.m. About old jobs, lost friends. What it's like to wake up every morning not knowing which breath might be your last. She tells him her real name. He doesn't repeat it. Many people still think black markets in 1940s Cuba were just about rum, cigars, maybe the occasional smuggled radio. But the truth was far messier. Havana wasn't just selling goods. It was selling silence. Every bribe, every handshake, every favor was part of a larger machinery built to keep the world's eyes closed. So what do you think? When someone like Frank tries to pry them open, should we call him a hero? Or just the last fool standing? In the days that follow, Havana grows colder. Not by temperature, but by tension. You can feel it in the way people walk. Heads slightly lower. Eyes darting just a bit too often. Conversations soften at the sound of a stranger's footsteps. Something invisible is circling overhead, and everyone seems to sense it. Frank Wallace walks through the streets with the same loose confidence as always, but his senses are dialed to 11. Every engine backfire makes him flinch. Every knock on the door slows his breathing. He's not afraid exactly, but he knows what happens to men who get too loud in a city designed for whispers. One night, as he's crossing Callejon del Chorro, he spots a kid, couldn't be more than 12, slipping an envelope under the flower pot outside his apartment building. The kid doesn't run when Frank approaches. He just shrugs, says, "Senor Wallace?" and jogs off. Inside the envelope, another photograph, but this one isn't of Frank, it's Elena. And in the corner, written in red ink, she talks. She disappears. Frank folds the photo in half, slowly. Not because he's angry, but because if he doesn't, his hands might start shaking. That night, he meets Elena on the roof, cigarettes in hand, rain trickling down the gutters, the city glowing below, oblivious and beautiful. "They know," he says. "I figured," she replies, flicking ash into the wind. "You could leave." She laughs, short and bitter. "Where? To another country crawling with ghosts." He says nothing. She continues, "I made this bed, Frankie. I knew it was full of snakes. I just hoped one of them would eat the others before I laid down." That's when he realizes something. They're not just allies anymore. They're survivors of the same storm. The next morning, Sergio calls. Urgent. The broadcast station has been raided. Not by the police, but by syndicate men. Frank arrives to find the place gutted. Equipment smashed, recordings stolen. Sergio bruised but breathing. "They didn't want the tapes," Sergio mutters. "They wanted the schedule. They know what we were planning." Which means Frank has no more air cover. No coded radio bursts. No gentle nudges to the city's night owls. He's exposed now, naked, and the city is watching. That's when he makes the next move, a reckless one, a deliberate one. He walks into the Hotel Nacional, bold as a tourist with nothing to hide, and demands a meeting with Valentin Calderon, one of Batista's lesser-known yet deeply connected men. The receptionist nearly chokes. A bellhop drops a tray. Within 10 minutes, Frank is escorted to a private suite on the top floor. Calderon awaits, draped in silk, sipping something too expensive for this city's conscience. "You've made a mess," Calderon says without looking up. Frank sits, doesn't wait to be invited. "I've made a point." The older man smiles. "And now?" "I'm offering a deal." "Oh?" Frank leans in. "You let the girl go. You tell your dogs to back off, and in return I disappear." Calderon raises an eyebrow. "That's all?" For now, there's silence, thick, charged. Then Calderon says something unexpected. "Do you know what your problem is, Wallace? You think this is a story where you get to walk away. It's not. It never was." Frank doesn't flinch. "We'll see." Back in his apartment, he finds the second shoe. This time not in a crate, just sitting on the bed, polished, laced, as if inviting him to put them both on and step into the unknown. He doesn't. He burns it in the sink. That night, Elena brings him a gift. A bottle of stolen scotch, a stolen key to the bell tower of San Francisco Church, and 10 minutes of uninterrupted silence. They sit up there, city spread below them, waves crashing just out of earshot. "This place is going to kill us," she says softly. "Maybe," Frank replies, "but not tonight." Mainstream history tells you the Havana black market collapsed slowly in the late 40s, under international pressure and internal corruption. But insiders know better. They say it unraveled because a few people stopped playing along. People who decided not to cash out, but call out. Frank Wallace wasn't a revolutionary. He didn't want change. He wanted truth, even if it came wrapped in dynamite. So what do you think? If your silence feeds the machine, and your voice invites the bullet, what would you choose? The quiet doesn't last long. By the second week of February, Havana's streets start breathing differently. Tensions that once simmered below surface now bubble in plain view. Syndicate safe houses are torched in the night. Loyalists vanish without explanation. Whispers turn into murmurs, murmurs into rumors. And Frank, who once moved through this chaos like a ghost, finds himself dragged into the center. He never asked for followers, but they come anyway. Dock workers, musicians, a few disillusioned army deserters, people who've lost more than money in this city, people who've lost their place in its story. They call him El Zapatero Fantasma, the shoemaker ghost. He doesn't find it flattering. He finds it dangerous. One night, while moving goods through the back of an abandoned theater, Frank spots a face he hasn't seen in years, Miguel Torres, a bruiser from Buffalo, once a rival in the bootlegging days. Last time they met, Miguel left with 2 broken ribs and a grudge large enough to fill the Erie Canal. Now? He's smiling like they shared childhood summers. "Frankie boy," Miguel says, arms open. "Heard you're building a church for the damned." Frank doesn't move. "What are you doing here, Miguel?" "Same as you, trying not to drown." They talk, carefully, like men negotiating a ceasefire during a thunderstorm. Turns out Miguel's been freelancing in Miami, running errands for leftover Capone disciples. He heard whispers about Havana heating up. He came not to fight, but to watch. And maybe, just maybe, place a bet. Later, Frank tells Elena, "If Miguel's here, others will follow." She nods. The question is, are they here to help or finish the job? Frank doesn't answer, because deep down he already knows. Meanwhile, Batista's men begin a quiet purge, not on newspapers or opposition radio. Those days are gone. No. Now they go after bartenders, porters, women who serve rum to the wrong clients, men who whistle the wrong melody. A revolution is easier to smother when it's still a whisper. Frank's people start disappearing, one by one. He attends no funerals, sends no messages, but each name scribbled on his wall grows heavier. A week later, the syndicate makes its move, not through blood, but through celebration. They throw a masquerade gala at El Vedado, an ostentatious affair with imported champagne, hired dancers, and a full brass band flown in from Chicago. The invitation reaches Frank's hands via a cab driver who refuses to make eye contact. Elena says, "It's bait." Frank says, "It's a stage." He shows up, not in costume, but in a pressed linen suit, polished shoes, and a stolen Cuban tie. People part for him like he's royalty or death. Valentin Calderon is there. So is Miguel. And somehow, even Sergio, dressed like he's trying to remember what joy once felt like. Frank moves through the room slowly. He sips nothing, dances with no one. Then he sees her, Lucia Rojas, a journalist who once dared write about smuggling routes and vanished for months. Now she's back, on Calderon's arm. She locks eyes with Frank, then looks away. That's all he needs to know. In a quiet corner near the bandstand, Calderon approaches. "You've made quite the name, Mr. Wallace." Frank smiles tightly. "Names are cheap, actions are currency." Calderon tilts his head. "Then what's your currency worth these days?" Frank replies, "Enough to buy a story." And then he pulls a tiny envelope from his jacket. Inside, a photograph of a meeting. Calderon, a known general, and a pair of men from Chicago's North Side. Clear as day. Frank doesn't say a word. He just places the envelope on a silver tray beside the champagne and walks away. 3 days later, the photo appears, unattributed, in a French magazine. 2 weeks later, Calderon disappears from public life. Some say he retired. Some say he moved to Brazil. Many believe he was never seen again. So what do you think? When power starts eating itself, is that justice? Or just a change in appetite? After Calderon's disappearance, Havana exhales, soft, cautious, like a woman waking from a nightmare she isn't sure has ended. Frank doesn't celebrate. He knows better. In this business, one fallen pillar just makes room for another. And with Calderon gone, a dozen men scramble to fill the vacuum. That kind of ambition? It makes people careless. It makes Havana dangerous again. But for now, just for a moment, there's quiet. And in that quiet, something strange happens. Frank Wallace becomes a myth. It starts with small things. A beggar on the corner swears he saw Frank give a loaf of bread to a pregnant girl outside the San Rafael market. A sailor claims Frank paid a priest to hide a dozen orphans from Batista's raids. A madam at a local brothel tells clients the walls are protected because El Irlandés drinks there every Sunday. Of course, Frank did none of these things, but he doesn't correct them. He lets the story grow, because sometimes myth works faster than muscle. He spends his mornings walking the harbor, a ghost in linen, silent except for the scrape of his shoes on sun-beaten stone. Elena follows at a distance. She says nothing, just watches. She knows he's measuring things, not just the boats or the tide, but the mood of the city, the temperature of Havana's soul. In the afternoons, he sits in a dusty back room of a shuttered cigar factory, pen in hand, notebooks open, scribbling names, not enemies, but heirs. Because Frank, against every instinct, is beginning to understand something terrifying. He won't be around forever. Late one evening, as the rain starts to fall in curtains against the window glass, Frank finally asks Elena the question he's been holding back. What would happen if I left? She doesn't answer right away. Instead, she takes a long drag from her cigarette, the ember glowing like a dying promise. Then she says, "They'd turn on each other, tear this place apart." Frank nods. He expected that. "But," she adds, "if you left right, if you handed it to the right people, maybe, just maybe, it'd hold together. For a while." He nods again. "That's all I want." And that night, something shifts in him. Not a breaking, but a letting go. Frank starts grooming replacements. Quietly, carefully. Not the loud ones who beg for power, but the quiet ones, the ones who listen more than they speak. A dock worker named Raphael with eyes like old stone. A street nurse called Anna who knows every alley, every bleeding boy, every dying whisper in old Havana. And a former soldier named Victor who once protected contraband liquor but now guards books. Frank doesn't give speeches, he gives tasks, and he watches. Meanwhile, rumors swirl again, not of coups or bombs, but of peace. Small businesses say bribes are down. Locals report fewer disappearances. A vendor tells Elena, "It's like someone's taking care of us, but invisible." She laughs, because she knows the truth. Frank Wallace is becoming Cuba's first invisible protector. Of course, not everyone's thrilled. Syndicate men from Chicago arrive. Furrowed brows, 2 shiny suits, eyes full of questions. They want numbers, accounts. A piece of the calm Frank built with blood. He gives them nothing. Just a smile, a bottle of Havana Club, and the name of a nightclub where they'll be mugged by dawn. One of them, Vinny Ruggieri, comes back with a broken nose and a story that doesn't add up. Frank listens, then tells Vinny, "You're free to leave whenever you like." Vinny does. That night, on a cargo plane full of bananas, he never returns. And just like that, the ghosts of Frank's past begin to vanish. One flight, one exile at a time. Havana isn't clean, but it's his. And for a city soaked in rum and sorrow, that's something. Many people still think that Frank Wallace was just a lucky Irishman who rode a sugar wave to power. They say Havana made him, that without the city, he'd still be cleaning shoes in Buffalo, dreaming of big time. But others, those who watched him, who felt the shift in Havana's heartbeat, believe something else, that maybe, just maybe, Frank made Havana. So what do you think? Wind down begins. And now, dear listener, the rain has slowed to a whisper against your window. The streets of 1940s Havana have emptied, their cobblestones slick with memory. Frank Wallace, with his quiet power and rum-soaked wisdom, fades once again into the fog of night, his legacy whispered by dock hands and dancers long after the music ends. Let your breath slow. Let the weight of this world ease from your chest. You're safe now. The ghosts have done their job. And in this moment, in this stillness, there is nothing you need to be, nothing you need to chase, only the soft pull of sleep and the fading echo of a shoeshine boy who became a king. Good night.